Wow, I would say. Wow, audiences, thank you so much. Kate, now we're here. Kate's, now we're here.
Thank God. Oh, thank God. Okay. Oh, phew. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We are so honored to have you both here and to talk about this beautiful picture. Please, Kate, take us back 8 years from now to the beginning of this journey. How did you start this project? How did you discover the story of Lee Miller?
Well, maybe like some people in this room, I knew who she was, and I knew a bit about her, but I realized I didn't know this Lee, and I didn't know enough about her. And I actually found myself in a position where a very good friend of mine works for an auction house selling wonderful old furniture, and I love old tables. It's something that I just have a fascination with, tables that have a history. And she phoned me and she said, "Oh, Kate, there's this incredible table that has come into the auction house, but I have to tell you the story about it." And it was a table that had existed in the kitchen of a home where Lee Miller and Roland Penrose used to spend their summers in England. And there were many photographs of Man Ray, Picasso, Lee, Max Ernst, Paul Eluard. They were all around this table. And I thought, oh my goodness, what an extraordinary story. Anyway, I got the table. And I sat at the table and I put my hands on it and I thought, wow, Lee Miller. Why hasn't anybody made a film about her? And that was the beginning of my journey. And I then went and I met with Anthony Penrose, their son, and that was the beginning of my relationship with Tony and my journey in starting to put this film together.
So what was it like to be a hands-on producer for the really first time, you could call it, because there were executive roles, but really like putting the whole things together for a very long time? How was this role very different for you?
Well, you know, the role of a producer is completely different to the job of an actor. And I realized going into it, you know, fuck, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I know about filmmaking, and I know about what happens when you get to work, and I know a lot about that situation, but how to actually put a film together from scratch by myself, I really had to listen and learn and understand. And then I was just so lucky because I met Kate, who had phenomenal experience. And we were just so fortunate that we got along straight away. Kate came on board 2 years before we actually started shooting the film. So I'd had kind of 5 years by myself. And it was really when I met Kate. And Kate is just so forward-thinking and just makes everything happen. And the two of us together, I was then able to make it a reality because of Kate.
I mean, Kate is also that person, because as many of you probably have made independent films, so much is about the energy of just convincing everyone you're going to do it, and that it's going to happen, and this is how we're going to make it, and being really just single-minded, and together that was our single-mindedness, was we were going to get Lee made, and it worked, it came off.
And I mean, a little bird might have told me that you actually sort of like lived together when you shot the movie. So you were really close in like producing, and really like, you became basically a film family, right?
Well, people would refer to us as the Kates. So if ever there was a question of, you know, we're losing the light and what should we do and are we going to make that scene, our first AD, Richard Stiles, who I've known since I was 19 years old, when he was a little floor runner on Hamlet making tea for everyone, and he's now our first AD. He also worked on The Reader. He would say, I'm going to go and ask the Kates. Okay, Kates? Question. So, but we did live together, and actually it was really the only way to do it, because sometimes we did have to make changes very last minute to the scenes that were coming the next day or the day after if we didn't have enough time or the weather was not going to be on our side, and just the two of us together. And Kate would sit there with her laptop, and I would stand up and I would act out all the characters. I would do all the parts, and we would say, okay, no, we need to make it smaller. We have to somehow, we've got to make it fit. We're only going to get two shots. And that was just how we did it.
Yeah, and every time a new actor arrived, like when we were in this flat in Budapest together, along with Kate's dialect coach, who's brilliant.
She lived with us as well.
I mean, she had to, because we were changing the lines. Then, you know, Kate would leave at 4:35, go and do makeup, shoot all day. And in between, she was in nearly every scene, as you can tell. I think we had half a day when we weren't shooting on Kate. And then in between takes, we would discuss what we need to do next and how, you know, anything we need to change. And then that night, if a new actor was coming in, they would come to the flat, we'd run through the lines, anything that changed, then Kate would go upstairs with Susan and have
sit
to do
on the
all
bedroom
the
floor and do all the figure out the dialect and how I was going to say everything. I mean, it was, yeah. Because so the dialect coach that Kate is talking about is a lady who has always helped me whenever I have to do an American accent, because I couldn't do it completely on my own, and never. And I'm lucky that I've known her since actually Titanic. And so whenever I have to play an American, I'm very lucky that this lady comes. But this is the first time that I'd lived with her. So it was kind of the three of us. And I'd be like, okay, if anyone needs anything from the grocery store on Saturday morning, I'm going. So just add your request to the list.
Put blueberries down. I don't know why.
I don't know why. Why would I always put blueberries down? I think I thought that was how we were going to survive the shoot.
Yes.
Was to eat lots of blueberries.
She also made us all lunch every day. She would leave early to go and do makeup. And I would get up, open the fridge, and there's a little glass box in there with a little post-it note saying Kate S. And it was a little salad. When she'd made her lunch, she'd make me one. So it was kind of many benefits to working with Kate Winslet.
That's so funny.
That sounds pretty lovely, actually. Usually you hear like, oh, it was so stressful at the set, but it does sound like a family. But let's go back to the topic of Lee Miller. Like, what facets, I mean, you talked about it in your introduction a little tiny bit, were you particularly interested? Because like here, I think like, just like the two of us at the beginning, most of the people know her as, of course, the woman in Hitler's bathtub, because that's the image that everyone sort of knows. But what facets were the ones that you particularly wanted to showcase in the movie?
Well, we had decided quite early on that if we were going to tell a story about this particular decade in her life, which was her most defining decade, and I believe the decade that she would have been the most proudest of, and also was the hardest for her to talk about, and that's why she never talked about it. But we realized early on that we had to, forgive me for this, but we had to slightly remove the men. So we made a decision, there were not going to be any scenes with Man Ray, there were not going to be any scenes with Picasso. And of course, the main relationships in her life were the ones with the relationship she had with Roland Penrose and with David Sherman. And so as soon as we decided, okay, we have to really just focus on that, then we were able to truly throw our energy into capturing just how extraordinarily brave she was, how phenomenally supportive she was of other women, how determined she was to reveal the truth at any cost. I mean, look what it did to her. And it really did destroy her. And that's why, like so many people who experienced the war, she just never spoke about it. And the PTSD was really very, very real. And one of the things that I know Anthony Penrose would say if he was here now, he would say that he was incredibly proud and impressed that his mother did recover from the alcoholism, and she did incredibly well in her later years and sort of reinvented herself again and became a cordon bleu chef and entered all these cookery competitions. I mean, she had a whole other existence. So in a way, developing the film so much of the time, and the reason why it took the time it did, was really being brave about deciding, okay, we can only do that decade, because her life, she lived 10 lives in her entire life, and it just would have been impossible. Like that's a 12-part TV series that I'm sure somebody will make at some point. But yeah, that was kind of how we did it.
How did you decide who would be directing the film? Because it's Ellen Kuras, you know her as a DP beforehand. We are aware that it's one of her first, if not her first work as a director. So how easy or difficult was the process, or were you involving her quite early on as well?
Well, I mean, I've known Ellen since Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where she was the cinematographer on that film. And, you know, back in those days, which is 20 years ago, there really weren't very many female crew members. You know, you might see the hair and makeup artist or perhaps the costume designer, but definitely you never saw women on the technical side. It was very, very unusual to come across a female cinematographer. So she and I formed a really good friendship on that film just because we were kind of the only girls. And so we stayed friends over those years. And then I was around when she made the transition from being a cinematographer into doing television as a director. Right. And it just made sense to us to have a woman direct this story. And given that Lee told stories through visual evidence and material, I realized that, of course, that's what Ellen has always done. She's always been an incredibly visual storyteller and really using her eye as an art form. And it just made sense to do it that way around.
Yeah, and I think it's brilliant, you know, because one of the really inspiring things about Lee is she just went and did things. And it feels like to be able to give a director, a female director, their first feature film at 62 is kind of great. It's like, you know, you stand on the edge of a precipice and you just go, and Lee would always have jumped. And you feel like that's what, it was great that Kate did that for Ellen, and so she could just go out and do it because, you know, maybe if she had been started her career 30 years later, she would have been able to start doing that earlier, but it's, you know, she's still got it in her 60s, which is brilliant.
And I mean, Kate, you do sort of have a background in photojournalism as well. And I mean, you've done quite a few documentaries on documenting war or documenting really tough and rough topics. How did it feel to turn a topic like that into a feature film?
Well, I think all you're looking for all the time is the story and how it relates, for me, how it relates to now. And what is it about the thing that you're telling that will speak to everyone, and so that people can come to the cinema or watch it at home and feel that there's something in that story that relates to their own lives. And I think that's when films really resonate and really do something. And, you know, that's why we make them, so people can feel things. And for me, Lee, watching Kate play Lee, you'd never know. This was 80 years ago. You know, she was a really modern woman. And the choices that she made, the things that she decided she could do are things that, you know, we all still battle around with now. And it's sadly not that different. I mean, things have changed, but she feels modern. And you know, I remember we sat and talked about how that was one thing we felt really proud of, that it felt like now. And also, I think Kate really captured her empathy. And to me, that's another thing that really speaks to today. You know, how could Lee go out and capture those things? It was because she felt what those people feel. The people who are, you know, before that, war photography was often planting flags, the front line, the tanks, you know, and then what Lee saw was the people behind, the civilians, the people who were affected, the refugees who were walking the tracks to find somewhere safe to be, and that has a direct thread to what we now think of as photojournalism, as war correspondence. And she could do that because she could feel their loss, and she wanted to tell that truth. And I feel like that is something that if we watch, it would be lovely if more people had more empathy in this world. You know, we need it now, and as if you can kind of feel that empathy and spill that out into the world, that would be a lovely thing. I think that's what you look for in work.
You said it's an independent film, but yet it captures this epoch, this 10 years, so very well. But what was maybe the hardest sequence to shoot, or something that you thought like nearly, oh yeah, okay, good, I stop here, please.
Well, I feel like it was all quite hard. For Kate, she's in every frame pretty much, so the rest of us could kind of watch and go, well, maybe do that again. You'd be like, she pulls herself out the mud, up she gets, it was like, you know.
Yeah, but I have to say, I think if there, I mean, getting the balance right really throughout the film was constantly something that we were aware of. So not taking the audience too far into the heart of darkness too quickly, knowing how far we do take you, into the heart of darkness. That was a very delicate balance. But then, quite honestly, the part that was hardest to shoot really was Dachau. And I think it was hardest of, it was extremely hard for Andy Samberg, who did not want to see the set at all until we were actually rolling on his face. So his entire reaction as we are walking in really is how he was reacting and how that made him feel. And it was just so important to us to make sure that we weren't trying to emulate images of the camps that have been done brilliantly by other filmmakers in the past. We had to really be determined to make sure we were only seeing it through Lee's eyes. And that was quite, honestly, that was actually quite hard to do, because our set was fantastic and we had supporting artists coming in that day, even people who were lying naked, I'm afraid to say, on the top of that pile of bodies. And I kept thanking them between takes, just saying, thank you, thank you. And they kept looking up at me and saying, no, it's important. And so that was, and of course, just what it is and what we were recreating. It was very hard for everybody. And Anthony Penrose is actually in that sequence. So Lee Miller's son, he was there that day, and he said, I want to be in this scene. And we said, why? He said, I need to. That was what he said, I need to. And as we walk through the archway, and Lee locks eyes with a prisoner who is standing with his hand on the window ledge, that's Anthony Penrose. And it was just so important to him to be in that particular scene. He's an amazing man.
The other side is, as we told before, you're in nearly every scene, and it must have been physically strenuous. I mean, this is a very physical role. I mean, was there, in that sense, also a very hard scene or a very hard sequence that kind of was very difficult to do? I'm thinking, of course, about the war scenes when you fall into the rubble. So,
well. I mean, I don't remember really sitting down. I didn't really sit down. You know, it would be lunch, but I would still be doing something, or Kate and I would be working, and we'd be talking about the afternoon or the next day, and I would just be eating and walking around. That was why we had to make our own food, because we didn't know when we were going to be able to eat it. So at least if we had it there, we would just go, oh, quick, now. Okay, so we would eat then. But those battle sequences physically actually were difficult, because I had in fact injured myself the day before we started filming. The day before we started filming the whole film, I slipped and I really injured my back very badly. And I thought, oh God, are we in trouble? But then I thought, well, we can't call an insurance day. What are we going to do? I'm just going to keep going. Okay, we're going to keep going. It's going to be fine. And so I was really in a lot of pain and just carried on, you know. But then I did think to myself, well, this is probably Lee. Like, she's probably doing this to me because she very famously, it's true. I mean, she's pulling the levers all the time. But she went through the war with chronic back pain and talked about it. And in fact, to alleviate the pain at one point, she even got someone to make a real bear, sit on her back, because she thought that was going to help her pain. She's complete. I didn't do that. I'm not that method.
You offered.
But yeah, so Lee had back pain, so I thought, great, okay, she was in pain, I'm in pain, let's go. Okay, let's go. That's just sometimes just what you have to do.
But still, what I loved in the film is how you portrayed the lightheartedness at the beginning, in the early years in France, and then that transition into, you know, the days getting darker by the minute, by the minute, by the minute. How did you go about that shooting-wise? Did you actually like shoot those sequences in the chronology of her life, or did you start differently or shoot like different aspects?
Well, we shot Croatia first, which was playing for the south of France. But within that Croatia, I remember Marion Cotillard's first day was shooting the scene where she's sweeping up and Kate finds her. So not all the locations were, you know, that was one of the locations.
That was Marion Cotillard's first day on our film. And we made her do that really difficult scene. She was like, oh, it's okay. It's like,
yeah, we took her for it. We had,
yeah.
It was like, it got better for her.
But she was amazing. She said, you know, sometimes it's like that, and you have to just say, okay, it's for a reason, and I'm ready, and we just go. And that's where we were so lucky with all of our actors. They showed up, they delivered. All of those actors for the South of France sequence, including Marion, we had them all for 1 week. And we just did everything in that 1 week. Yeah. It was almost the first week, I think. The very first day was Saint Malo, and we had 3 days in that location of the running and the war sequence. And then we got happy and went to the South of France, which was only just up the road in Croatia. And, and it was very joyful, and it was at the beginning. So we were very glad to have had that kind of fun time first.
Yes.
Yeah.
I imagine, and I mean, you were just mentioning it, the cast is amazing, all of the actors in it are amazing. Did all of them just say, like, of course I'm gonna join the two Kates on this project? Did they come on board really early? Did you get them on board? Did you just
yes.
call up your...
They did. We just put together, like, literally our wish list, our dream cast list. And then I said to Kate, well, now what do we do? And she said, well, phone them up. I was like, but I don't really know them. She's like, that's fine. We're just going to figure it out. And so I did I just personally started to ask each of these wonderful actors if they would come and join us. And we were just so lucky. Everybody said yes. And it was just amazing. And actually, they, as a little group of actors, they absolutely adored each other. And they had this wonderful time. They had this 1 week all together. And they were so happy to be there. It was kind of really, it was very moving to see, actually. And we didn't really expect that, because you never know, you know. Actors are quite strange. But we were very lucky that these were not in any way strange at all. They were wonderful people who all got along so well, and we had an amazing time with them.
You were talking about the amazing sets, you were talking about shooting in Croatia. Is there any element of using original location when it comes to Lee Miller's heritage? Are we having glimpses at some original places, or is it all sets?
It was all sets, because just for the purely logistical, trying to get through it, and we need to find somewhere, because you can't really shoot France for wartime France anymore, because all of Paris has got all these bollards and stuff like that, whereas Budapest still has the big boulevards, and you can shoot it for that. You can also shoot it for Germany, and so we had to kind of make it work that way.
Right. And Anthony Penrose, how was? We know that a book about Lee Miller has your foreword in it. It's his book. So how did the working with him gain traction, and how early did you work closely together?
I worked closely with him right away from the very beginning. I knew that was the most important thing. I had to go straight to meet him. I wanted to, and it just made sense straight away to bring him in and be fully a part of this process. He is the keeper of the archive. He knows more about her than anyone else, and he fully welcomed us into that world as much as we were able to bring him fully into our world, and we really couldn't have done it without him. And I had a very specific relationship with him, and even when we were filming and he wasn't there, if I was worried or about a scene that was coming or I had questions, I would just call him the night before and I'd say, okay, Tony, just talk me through this again. And we would go through it all again. And sometimes we would make some changes to the script or something that Lee was going to say based on the conversation I would have with him, sometimes literally the night before. And these were often scenes that had been on the page for several years. But when you're there in the moment and you're really bringing that person to life and these characters to life and you're telling that story, sometimes things do change. And we were very lucky that he was always really open to that. I actually kind of loved that. He loved the spontaneity of that.
And Lee herself was an actress too, which not a lot of people know. Did you watch any of her films or any of her documents? Are there any?
Well, she wasn't very good, bless her. But I think she herself would have said, I was a lousy actress. I mean, she didn't think she was very good at all. And I think acting was something that she sort of stumbled into and stumbled out of again quite quickly. So bless her for trying. But no, I have to be honest, that wasn't a huge part of my research in playing Lee.
Did you take an interest in photography as well through the process of really diving
Kate
into
took all of her own photos. The Rolleiflex was loaded with real film all the way through. We have all the photos that Kate took, and they're really good.
Thanks.
No, I mean, they're really...
Yeah, I mean, I really, that camera had to become an extension of my arms. Because sometimes there's a danger when you play a character who was known for doing a certain technical thing. There's always a danger that that object can look like a prop that you were handed on the first day of filming, and that someone is always telling you how to do. And I really didn't want that to be the case. I had to be the person who understood that camera better than anybody else. And so I did spend a long time working with the camera and coming to understand how to use it, just learning actually how to hold it exactly the way Lee had done. That was quite tricky, that part, because it was so specific where she placed her thumb, and she had also cut little holes into the leather case around her camera so that she could really fit her thumb in exactly the right position to adjust the focus. And we were very lucky because we had Anthony Penrose, who had her real camera and who had her original case. And so the camera that we have in the film is an exact replica of the real thing. I've got so many pictures of the two of them, the two cameras, Lee's camera and our camera side by side, with me and Tony saying, does it look the same? And Tony would say, it's almost there. We just need to make a little bit more mark here, and he would, he'd be scratching at the leather with his finger to make it look more real. And we just did everything we could to have it feel just as real as possible.
I think we could sit here and chat pretty much forever with the two of you, but unfortunately the time is already almost up. But I wanted to ask one last question. So are the two Kates gonna do more projects together? Because I might have known that, the family stays family. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I like that. I would say thank you so much for joining us here and sharing your beautiful picture, Lee, with us here tonight. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.